No? Not moved. Amendment 37, Lord Moylan.
My Lords, I rise to move Amendment 37, and I will also speak to Amendment 460 in my name, which is closely linked to it, and they work to a similar effect. My Lords, the purpose of these amendments is to go back to the question of what we're actually trying to achieve in this bill, what its purpose is. I think we'd all agree that what we want is honesty, transparency, and value for money in public procurement in broad terms. But as I said in my second reading speech, it seems to me that what we're achieving is the sort of the bureaucratization of honesty, whereas we should in fact be focusing on the principles. We're creating a great beneficial bonus for lawyers, as was identified by the noble Lord Fox when he spoke on an earlier day in committee. The key to real-world management of procurement is flexibility, to be able to respond to circumstances as they change during a tender. The current system, as I said at second reading, operates by setting up some conditions at the beginning over which the contracting authority has very great control, but once the conditions are set up at the beginning, the system operates with great rigidity after that, so that it's very difficult to respond to changing circumstances in the course of the tender or to surprising tenders that might be received. I gave some examples at second reading. I particularly mentioned the great non-existent iconic London bus shelter. But since then, I'm going to detain noble lords with a couple further examples, because I've been contacted since then by a former local government officer with whom I have great respect, with two examples from the water sector. One of them related to a contract in which, I can't supply the names, one of them related to a contract in which the officers had set up in advance the very precise and clear criteria by which to submit to analyse the tenders they received in respect of a waste collection contract. But when one of the tenderers said that for certain types of waste we will pay you in order to collect it, that can make sense for certain recyclates, we will pay you in order to collect that type of waste, the whole assessment system effectively collapsed because it hadn't contemplated that sort of bid. And as far as I'm aware, everything had to be scrapped and started again, whereas a sensible approach would have allowed that to be flexibly adapted. The second was a case where the local authority decided to take a relaxed, let's see what the market comes up with approach to the tender, and that can be appropriate as well, also for a waste collection contract. Unfortunately for them, the cheapest bidder proposed that they should collect the waste from households only once every 4 weeks. Well, that's why they were the cheapest bidder. Now, unfortunately, of course, that was neither environmentally nor politically acceptable, but what could they do about it at that stage? All they could do was put pressure on the second lowest bidder, who had sensibly proposed a 2-week collection cycle, to cut their price to make them competitive with the 4-week people. That duly went through. The 2-week collection was awarded the tender, and within a matter of months the contract had effectively collapsed because, of course, they couldn't make it work at the price they'd been obliged to agree. So why is there no flexibility in the system once the initial conditions have been set up? The practical reason for it is this, that the people I described in my second reading speech as the high priests of procurement will turn up the moment you say, this is daft, we should be able to do something about it. The moment you try to say that, they turn up and they say, but if you do that, then a disappointed bidder may sue you for failures in the process. And that is why you are tied with iron hoops to the process that you have set in motion at the outset. What we need is a bill that focuses on principles rather than on process. These two amendments do that by preventing disappointed bidders from suing a contracting authority for process faults, but only for breach of the objectives set out in Clause 11. And to remind noble lords, they are to do with value for money, maximising public benefit, sharing information, acting with integrity and being seen to act with integrity, and equal treatment of tenderers. Now, it's very important for me to explain that the approach I am proposing is not necessarily tied to Clause 11, because there are certain noble lords who are proposing that the bill be augmented with a further set of principles. The amendment in the name of the noble Baroness Lady Hayman of Ulloch adds a set of principles to the objectives in Clause 11. My amendment is perfectly compatible with her approach. If the House decides that the objectives for the bill, the principles underlying it, are not sufficiently and adequately expressed in Clause 11, and that further objectives and principles are required, then at report stage, my amendment could, of course, be adapted to fit in with those principles. I am, in this particular debate, staying neutral on the various proposals that are coming forward for how to develop principles. I'm totally neutral on the noble Baroness's amendment because mine would fit with it if that is the direction the House and the Government and the Committee wished to take. So it's very important to bear that in mind. I'm not tying it explicitly to Clause 11. I think it's also important to bear in mind something else I said. This is not a bill for combating fraud, corruption, malfeasance in public office. All of those things are criminal offences. If a contracting authority commits those offences, they will not be prosecuted under the terms of this bill. They will be prosecuted under the relevant provisions of the criminal law, quite properly. What this bill does is create a huge bureaucratic minefield for contracting authorities in which disappointed tenderers can sue for some sort of compensation or damages, not that they do very often, but that is a chilling factor when it comes to the flexibility of that contracting authorities should rightly have. Now, some people would say that this would radically alter the whole approach of the bill. I think it is a fairly radical alteration of the approach of the bill, but I speak with some experience when I say that I think it would also make it a workable bill. And I hope my noble friend, if he or she is not immediately inclined to agree, will at least explain why this approach does not commend itself to Her Majesty's government.
Amendment